questions. I hope we don't go back to some of the practices in the past that, Harry and I had to grow up in. I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda.
Buckingham Palace received an urgent call in the dead of night. Prince Harry's U.S. visa has been revoked. Prince William is pulled from his family and forced into an impossible choice. Sign an emergency order protecting the crown, or protect his brother. He chooses the institution. But was it leadership, or the moment their family broke forever? Stay with us. The call that shattered the crown. The clock struck midnight at Buckingham Palace. London slept peacefully under a blanket of February frost, unaware that history was being rewritten behind gilded gates. Prince William sat cross-legged on the floor of his private quarters, building a tower of wooden blocks with his youngest child. Laughter filled the room. For a brief moment, he was just a father, not a future king. Then his phone rang. The number on the screen made his stomach drop. It was the kind of call that never brought good news. "Sir, we have a situation." The voice on the other end said, tight with urgency. "It's about Prince Harry." William's hand froze mid-reach for another block. His child looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. He forced a smile, kissed the small forehead before him, and stood up. The tower of blocks tumbled down as he left the room. Within minutes, he was surrounded by advisors in a wood-paneled office that smelled of old leather and anxiety. The news was impossible to process at first. Harry's visa had been revoked. Not next month. Not next week. Tonight, without warning, without explanation. "How is this possible?" William asked, his voice sharp. No one had a good answer. The American government had given no advance notice, no diplomatic courtesy, just a cold, bureaucratic decision that landed like a bomb in the middle of the night. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Advisors spoke over each other, their voices blending into a wall of noise. Some wanted to stay silent, to wait for more information before reacting. Others argued that silence would make the palace look guilty, as if they were hiding something. "We need a statement," one advisor insisted. "We need to understand what happened first," another shot back. William stood at the window, staring out at the darkened gardens. His reflection looked back at him, tired and uncertain. He thought of Harry across the ocean, probably asleep, with no idea that his world was about to collapse. The king should have been there. He should have been the one making these decisions. But his health had been failing, and everyone knew it. The weight that should have rested on his father's shoulders now pressed down on William instead. He was not ready for this. But ready or not, the crown was already shifting. "Where is my father?" William asked quietly. The room went silent. An advisor cleared his throat. "He's been informed, sir, but he's asked that you handle this, as if it were a simple matter, as if his brother's life was just another problem to solve." William turned back to face the room. His jaw tightened. He was being asked to choose between two impossible things: protect the institution that had defined his entire life, or protect the brother he had grown up with, fought with, and slowly lost. Hours passed. Coffee cups piled up on the conference table. Outside, the sky began to lighten from black to gray. Dawn was coming, and with it, disaster. That was when the leaks started. A German newspaper was the first to publish, then a French outlet, then an American news site. The story spread like wildfire across the internet, moving faster than the palace could ever hope to contain it. William watched it happen in real time, his phone buzzing with alerts. Every news site had a different angle, a different theory. But they all agreed on one thing. This was a scandal. This was a crisis. This was news. "We've lost control of the narrative," an advisor said, stating the obvious. William said nothing. He was thinking about Harry, about Meghan, about their children waking up to find their lives turned upside down. He was also thinking about the crown, about duty, about everything he had been taught since birth. An aide entered the room carrying a folder. Inside was a single document, printed on heavy paper. An emergency order. a formal response drafted in careful legal language. William took the folder and opened it. His eyes scanned the words, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. This was not just paperwork. This was a choice, a line in the sand. If he signed it, he would be choosing the institution over his brother. If he refused, he would be choosing his brother over everything he had been raised to protect. The room watched him in silence. No one dared speak. William looked down at the document again. His hand hovered over the page. The pen felt impossibly heavy. The truth buried in paper. 3 months earlier, a file had been opened in Washington. It sat on a desk in an office with no windows, reviewed by people whose names would never appear in any newspaper. The file was labeled with a case number, not a name, but everyone who touched it knew exactly who it was about. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, resident of California, visa holder, problem. The review had been quiet. Routine, they called it. But nothing about royalty was ever truly routine. Questions had been raised about statements Harry made during his visa application. Questions about things he had written in his book. Questions about admissions that contradicted official documents. No one wanted to be the person who made the final call. So the file moved from desk to desk, gathering notes and signatures, until it could not be ignored any longer. By the time it reached someone with the authority to act, the decision was already made. The visa would be revoked, not because of who Harry was, but because of what he had said. William learned none of this until that midnight phone call. But as the sun rose over London and advisors laid out the full picture, he realized something sickening. This had been building for months, and people inside the palace had known. "How long?" William asked, his voice dangerously calm. An advisor shifted uncomfortably. "We became aware of the American review process approximately 12 weeks ago." 12 weeks. 3 months. An entire season had passed while bureaucrats in 2 countries quietly prepared to destroy his brother's life, and no one had thought to tell him. "And my father?" "He was informed 6 weeks ago, sir." William felt something crack inside his chest. His father had known. The institution had known. They had all watched this coming like a slow-motion car crash and done nothing to stop it. Why wasn't I told? The room fell silent. The answer hung in the air, unspoken but understood. Because they did not trust him to make the right choice. Because they feared he might warn Harry. Because blood was thicker than duty, and that made him a risk. William stood and walked to the window again. Outside, London was waking up. People were starting their days with coffee and toast, completely unaware that the monarchy was tearing itself apart from the inside. The legal issues were complicated, but the heart of it was brutally simple. Harry had written things in his memoir. He had said things in interviews. Some of those things contradicted what he had told American immigration officials. Whether those contradictions were intentional or innocent did not matter. What mattered was that they existed, and now they had consequences. But there was more. Documents that had not yet been made public. Private communications between governments. Memos discussing whether the palace had provided information to American authorities. Whether cooperation had occurred behind closed doors. If these documents leak, an advisor said carefully, the optics will be catastrophic. Optics. William hated that word. It reduced human tragedy to public relations. What will people think? The advisor continued. That we betrayed him, that we used his honesty against him. That privilege protects some royals but not others. William turned sharply. Did we? Did we what, sir? Betray him. Did anyone in this building provide information that led to this? The silence that followed was answer enough. Across the Atlantic, Harry was just waking up. The California sun streamed through his windows, warm and bright. He reached for his phone out of habit, scrolling through messages while still half asleep. Then he saw the news alerts. Dozens of them. Hundreds. His visa had been revoked. He sat up so fast his head spun. This had to be a mistake. A false report. Fake news designed to hurt him. He called his lawyer, then his publicist. then anyone who might have answers. The answers, when they came, were worse than the questions. It was real. It was effective immediately. And it had been in the works for months. Harry felt the floor drop out from under him. Months. They had been investigating him for months and no one had warned him. No lawyer, no diplomat, no family members. Family. His mind went immediately to the palace, to William, to the machine that had chewed him up and spit him out once before. He had thought he was free of it. He had thought distance would protect him. But the crown had a long reach and an even longer memory. He tried calling William. The call did not go through. He tried again. Nothing. That was when the fury set in. Hot and sharp and all-consuming. He was not just angry about the visa. He was angry about everything. Every slight. Every betrayal. Every time he had been thrown under the bus to protect the institution. And now this. The ultimate humiliation. Exiled from the country he had chosen as his refuge. The place where he had tried to build a new life away from the spotlight. Someone had done this to him. Someone had pulled strings. Someone had wanted this to happen. In London, William stared at his phone. He had 7 missed calls from Harry. He could not bring himself to call back. Not yet. Not until he knew what to say. Because the truth was complicated. Yes, the palace had known about the investigation. Yes, they had been in contact with American officials. But had they actively sabotaged Harry, or had they simply failed to protect him? William did not know anymore. The lines had blurred. Duty and betrayal looked too much alike. An aide handed him another document. This one outlined the potential fallout if certain details became public. The headlines practically wrote themselves. The palace betrays the exiled prince. The royal family weaponizes immigration system. Monarchy exposed as vindictive machine. We need to get ahead of this, an advisor urged. But how do you get ahead of the truth? William thought about his brother across the ocean, probably pacing his living room, probably feeling more alone than ever. He thought about their childhood, about the promises they had made to each other after their mother passed on, about loyalty and brotherhood and all the things that were supposed to matter more than crowns. Then he thought about the institution, about the crown that had survived wars and scandals and centuries of upheaval, about duty and sacrifice and the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. He could not save both. The realization settled over him like ice water. This was not a crisis that could be managed with clever PR or careful diplomacy. This was a choice, a line drawn in stone. Protect Harry and risk the crown. Protect the crown and lose his brother forever. The ink that severed blood. The pen felt cold in William's hand. He had signed his name thousands of times before, on official documents, birthday cards, state papers. His signature was as familiar to him as his own face. But this time, as he pressed the pen to paper, everything felt different. The emergency order sat before him on the polished desk. 2 pages of carefully crafted legal language that said everything and nothing at once. It did not mention Harry by name. It did not need to. Everyone would know exactly what it meant. The document distanced the crown from any individual royal's legal complications abroad. It emphasized cooperation with international law. It protected the institution from being dragged into foreign legal battles. It was clean, professional, devastating. William's hand hovered over the signature line. Around him, advisors stood frozen, barely breathing. They had argued for hours. Some had pushed for this exact moment. Others had warned it would destroy what little remained of the family. But in the end, the decision belonged to William alone. He thought of his children asleep upstairs. He thought of the crown that would one day pass to his son. He thought of duty, the word that had shaped his entire existence. Then he thought of Harry, his little brother, the boy who used to follow him everywhere, the teenager who had stood beside him at their mother's funeral, both of them trying not to break in front of the world. The man who had once been his closest friend. William signed his name. The scratch of pen on paper sounded impossibly loud in the silent room. When he lifted the pen, it was done. No taking it back. No undoing what had just been set in motion. He did not look up. He could not face the expressions of the people around him. Some would be relieved, others would be horrified. All of them would remember this moment as the night Prince William chose the crown over his brother. An aide moved forward immediately, collecting the document as if it might catch fire. Within the hour, it would be processed, filed, and transmitted to the appropriate authorities. The machinery of monarchy moved fast when it wanted to. Word spread through the palace like a shockwave. In the servants' quarters, people whispered in corners. In the administrative offices, staff exchanged worried glances. Everyone understood what had happened, even if the official language tried to hide it. The future king had just cut his brother loose. Some called it ruthless, a calculated move by a man who understood power better than sentiment. William had done what his father could not, or would not, do. He had made the hard choice. Others saw it differently. They saw a man backed into a corner, forced to choose between impossible options. They saw someone doing what he believed was necessary to protect something bigger than himself. But everyone agreed on one thing: William had changed. The uncertainty from earlier was gone. In its place was something colder, harder, more king-like. The king himself remained silent. His health kept him away from the crisis, but his absence spoke volumes. Some wondered if he had orchestrated this from the shadows, pushing William into the role of executioner so his own hands stayed clean. Others believed he was simply too weak to intervene, leaving his son to navigate the storm alone. Either way, the silence felt like approval, or abandonment, perhaps both. William sat alone in his office after everyone left. The document was gone, already beginning its journey through official channels, but he could still feel the weight of it in his hands. He picked up his phone. Harry's missed calls stared back at him. 7 earlier, now 11. Each one a scream into the void. William's thumb hovered over the call button. But what would he say? How do you explain choosing an institution over a person? How do you make someone understand that you did not want this, that you hated every second of it, but you did it anyway because you had to? He put the phone down without calling. In California, Harry finally stopped trying. 11 unanswered calls, 11 rejections. The message was clear. William was not going to talk to him. The palace had made its choice, and that choice was not Harry. He sat on the edge of his bed, phone still in his hand, and felt something inside him break. Not the sharp break of sudden pain, but the slow fracture of something that had been cracking for years. All the old wounds came flooding back. Every time he had been the spare, not the heir. Every time the institution had protected William and left Harry to fend for himself. Every time duty had mattered more than brotherhood. Their mother's death, the media's cruelty, the palace's cold machinery grinding away at anything human. He had survived all of it, barely, and tried to escape, but the crown had followed him across an ocean, and now it was taking even his refuge away. Meghan found him there, sitting in the dark. She did not ask what was wrong. She already knew. She had warned him this would happen. She had seen the palace for what it was long before he was ready to admit it. She sat beside him, taking his hand. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Harry broke the silence. "They think I'll just disappear." His voice was quiet but sharp with anger. "They think I'll take this and fade away quietly, like a problem they solved." Meghan squeezed his hand. She knew that tone. She had heard it before, right before Harry made decisions that changed everything. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Harry looked at her, and she saw something dangerous in his eyes. Not rage. Exactly. Something colder, more determined. "I'm going to fight back." He stood up, energy suddenly flooding through him. The sadness was still there, buried deep, but it was covered now by something stronger. Purpose. Fury. The will to survive. He had tried to be the good soldier. He had tried to protect the family by staying silent about things that mattered. He had swallowed his pain and played by their rules. And where had it gotten him? Exiled. Betrayed. Erased. If they wanted a war, he would give them one. He picked up his phone again. But this time he did not call William. He called his lawyer, then his publicist, then a reporter he trusted. The palace thought they had contained the crisis with one signature. They thought William's order had closed the door on this chapter. They were wrong. The leak that changed everything. The story broke at 4 in the morning. A major American outlet published first. Within minutes, every news organization in the world was scrambling to catch up. The headline was simple but devastating. Palace insider claims secret deal betrayed exiled prince. The article was careful. No names, no direct accusations. Just enough detail to ignite a firestorm. It spoke of private conversations, promises made and broken. Senior royals allegedly cooperating with foreign governments to remove a problem they could not solve publicly. The sources were anonymous, but the fingerprints were obvious. This had come from Harry's team. This was his countermove. William learned about it when an aide burst into his bedroom, phone in hand, face pale. He read the article once, then again. Each word felt like a punch. Harry had just declared war. By breakfast, the media had exploded. Television panels debated palace conspiracies. Social media divided into armies. Hashtags trended worldwide. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone chose a side. Some believed Harry was fighting back against an institution that had always treated him as disposable. Others saw him as a bitter prince, willing to burn down his family for attention. The truth, as always, lived somewhere in the murky middle. But truth did not matter anymore. Perception did. And right now, the perception was chaos. Inside Buckingham Palace, William convened an emergency meeting. The same advisors who had stood with him days ago now looked uncertain. Some seemed angry. Others appeared nervous. A few would not meet his eyes. That was when William felt it. The shift in the room, the air of suspicion. "How did Harry know?" William asked quietly. No one answered at first. Then an advisor cleared his throat. "Know what, sir?" "Details, specifics, things that were discussed in private." William's voice grew harder. Someone told him. The room went still. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. For days, William had assumed the leak came from outside. A bureaucrat, a diplomat, someone in the American government with loose lips. But as he looked around the room at familiar faces, people he had trusted for years, he understood. The betrayal was coming from inside. "I want a full audit," William said. "Communications, phone records, everything." An aide shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, that could take weeks. Then start now." The investigation began within hours. Its specialists combed through servers. Security reviewed access logs. Slowly, carefully, they started finding breadcrumbs. Emails sent to encrypted accounts, phone calls made at odd hours, documents accessed by people who had no business reading them. The trail was faint but unmistakable. Someone inside the palace had been feeding information to Harry's team for years. Not everything, just enough. Little pieces that seemed harmless on their own but devastating when assembled. The discovery sent shockwaves through the staff. Trust evaporated overnight. Colleagues who had worked together for decades now eyed each other with suspicion. The palace, already under siege from outside, was now rotting from within. Meanwhile, another problem emerged: the king's health. Rumors had circulated for months, but they intensified now, fueled by his continued absence from public view. Officials insisted he was simply resting, recovering, taking things slow. But whispers told a different story. Some said he was too weak to make decisions. Others claimed he was being shielded from the crisis entirely, kept in the dark while his sons tore each other apart. A few suggested something darker, that he knew everything and had chosen silence as his strategy. Whatever the truth, his absence created a vacuum, and William was filling it whether he wanted to or not. The pressure was suffocating. Every decision felt like walking through a minefield. Move too aggressively and risk looking tyrannical. Move too cautiously and appear weak. There was no safe path forward. Then, late one night, an aide brought William a folder he had not requested. "You need to see this, sir." William opened it. Inside was a single document, a memo, dated 3 months earlier, buried in bureaucratic language but clear in its intent. The visa review had not been a random audit. It had been requested, pushed forward, accelerated. And the push had come from within the British government, in consultation with palace officials. William's blood ran cold as he read the names. People he knew. People who sat across from him in meetings. People who smiled and nodded and said the right things, while quietly setting his brother's life on fire. He looked up at the aide who had brought him the folder. "Who else knows about this?" "Just me, sir, and whoever wrote it." William stood and walked to the window. Outside, London stretched endlessly in all directions. Millions of people sleeping peacefully, unaware that their monarchy was imploding. The document explained everything. Why the timing had been so sudden, why no one had warned Harry, why the palace had seemed so prepared when the news broke. Because they had known. More than known. They had orchestrated it. And William, signing that emergency order, had become the final piece in someone else's plan. He felt sick, used, manipulated into doing exactly what they wanted while believing he was making his own choice. But who were they? Who had the power to move pieces on this board without him noticing? His mind went to the king. Too convenient, his absence. Too perfect, his silence. Then he thought of the advisors who had pushed so hard for that signature, the ones who had framed it as protecting the crown when really they were protecting themselves. William realized something terrible. He did not know who his allies were anymore. He did not know who to trust. The institution he had spent his life serving had become a house of shadows and lies. And somewhere in California, Harry was preparing his next move, armed with just enough truth to be dangerous. The confrontation was coming. Not a phone call, not a carefully worded statement. Something bigger. Something that would force everything into the light. When silence became a weapon, the lawyers met in a neutral office in New York. No cameras, no press. Just two teams of professionals sitting across a polished table, speaking on behalf of brothers who could no longer speak to each other directly. On one side sat William's representatives, armed with documents and precedent. On the other, Harry's team, carrying grievances and evidence of their own. Between them lay a chasm too wide for any legal language to bridge. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Voices remained controlled, but the tension was suffocating. Every word was chosen carefully, parsed for hidden meaning, stripped of anything human. Harry's lawyer spoke first. "Our client believes he was deliberately targeted by individuals within the palace who sought to undermine his security and reputation." William's lawyer responded without hesitation. "The Crown acted within its legal authority to protect institutional integrity. No personal vendetta exists." Back and forth it went, cold, clinical, utterly heartbreaking. Because buried beneath the legal jargon was a simple truth. Two brothers were destroying each other, and neither knew how to stop. In London, William paced his office after receiving the report. The lawyers had accomplished nothing except confirming what he already knew. There would be no easy resolution, no handshake and apology. The damage was too deep. He thought about calling Harry directly. His phone sat on the desk, mocking him with its silence. He could end this with one call, or at least try. But what would he say? That he was sorry? That he had no choice? That he would do it all again because the crown mattered more than anything? All of it was true. None of it would help. William had spent his entire life being told that duty came first, that personal feelings were luxuries royals could not afford, that the institution was bigger than any individual, even family. He had believed it, followed it, built his entire identity around it. But now, standing in his empty office with the weight of that choice crushing him, he wondered if he had been wrong all along. In California, Harry sat in his garden, staring at nothing. The lawyers had told him the meeting went as expected. No progress, no admission of wrongdoing, no accountability. Just the palace doing what it always did, protecting itself while pretending to be reasonable. He was not surprised. disappointed maybe, but not surprised. This was the system that had consumed his mother, the machine that had chewed up his mental health and spit out tabloid headlines, the institution that had smiled for cameras while quietly deciding he was expendable. Harry had tried to play by their rules. He had served, smiled, done his duty. And when that was not enough, when he dared to choose his own happiness, they had labeled him a traitor. Now they had taken even his refuge. The home he had built was far from their reach, the life he had fought so hard to create. And William, his brother, the person who should have protected him, had signed the order that made it possible. Harry felt something harden inside him. Not anger anymore, something colder. Acceptance, maybe. Or resignation. He was done hoping for reconciliation, done waiting for his family to choose him over the crown. That choice had been made, over and over, his entire life. Now it was his turn to choose. Meanwhile, the public began to notice that something was seriously wrong. At first, the story had seemed like another royal scandal, dramatic but temporary. The kind of thing that would blow over after a few news cycles. But it was not blowing over. It was intensifying. New leaks appeared almost daily. Anonymous sources, unnamed officials, each revelation more damaging than the last. The palace denied everything, but their denials sounded increasingly hollow. Polls showed public support for the monarchy dropping, not collapsing but slipping, especially among younger people who saw the whole thing as proof that the institution was outdated and cruel. International allies began asking quiet questions. Ambassadors made discreet inquiries. Was the British monarchy stable? Could it weather this storm? Should they be concerned? Every move William made now carried consequences far beyond his family. A misplaced word could trigger a diplomatic incident. A poorly timed statement could crash public confidence. He was no longer just protecting the crown, he was fighting for its survival. Late one night, William's most senior advisor requested an urgent meeting. The man's face was grave as he entered the office and closed the door carefully behind him. "We have a problem, sir." William almost laughed. They had nothing but problems. "There's another document," the advisor continued. "We don't know where it came from, but Harry's team has it, and if they release it, the consequences will be severe." William felt his stomach drop. What kind of document? The advisor hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Communication between senior palace staff and government officials. Discussing options for managing the Harry situation. Some of the language is unfortunate. Unfortunate. A nice way of saying damning. "How bad?" William asked. "Bad enough to force questions in Parliament. Bad enough to trigger calls for reform. Bad enough to make people question whether the monarchy as currently structured should continue to exist." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. William walked to the window. Outside, London sparkled with lights. Millions of lives going on, unaware that the crown they had known for centuries was balancing on a knife's edge. "When?" he asked quietly. "We don't know. Harry's team is holding it. Waiting. They want something in exchange." "What do they want?" "We don't know that either." William closed his eyes. This was checkmate. Harry held a weapon capable of destroying the institution, and William had no way to stop him from using it. Unless he gave Harry what he wanted. Whatever that was. The advisor cleared his throat. "Sir, there's something else you should know. The king has been informed. He wants to speak with you tomorrow morning." William nodded slowly. His father, absent through this entire crisis, finally ready to weigh in, too late to prevent the disaster, but perfectly timed to assign blame. The silence that spoke volumes. The statement came at 9 in the morning. It was released through official channels with no fanfare, no press conference, no photographs. Just words on paper, carefully arranged to say everything and nothing at once. The palace acknowledged recent concerns. It reaffirmed commitment to transparency within appropriate bounds. It expressed confidence in existing protocols while promising to review certain procedures. It thanked the public for their continued support during challenging times. Nowhere did it mention Harry by name, nowhere did it address the visa, nowhere did it admit fault or offer apology. But everyone understood exactly what it meant. The monarchy was moving on. With or without Prince Harry, with or without reconciliation, the institution would survive because the institution always survived. Within an hour, news outlets around the world were dissecting every word. Legal experts analyzed the careful language. Royal commentators debated what had been left unsaid. Social media erupted with opinions that would never change anyone's mind. The statement answered nothing directly, yet it confirmed everything indirectly. The family was broken. The damage was real, and no amount of official language could hide it. William read the statement from his office, though he had seen drafts a dozen times already. Each word had been debated, revised, approved by committees. What started as something human had been polished into something corporate. He hated it, but he had signed off on it anyway. Through the window, he watched London continue its day. People rushing to work, tourists taking photographs. Life moving forward because life always moves forward, regardless of what happened behind palace walls. He thought about the emergency order he had signed days ago, the decision that had set all of this in motion. People called it leadership. Others called it betrayal. William called it survival. But survival for what? For whom? The crown was intact. The institution remained. But at what cost? He had protected the monarchy by sacrificing his brother. He had chosen duty over blood. And now he stood in the wreckage of that choice, wondering if he had saved anything worth saving. His phone buzzed. Messages of support from allies, statements from Parliament, diplomatic communications from foreign governments. Everyone wanted to say the right thing, to be on the record as backing stability, but none of them understood what it felt like to lose a brother while the world debated whether you were right to do it. Across the ocean, Harry woke to the same statement. He read it once, sitting at his kitchen table with cold coffee and California sunshine streaming through the windows. Then he set his phone down and stared at nothing. The palace had spoken. Their answer was silence dressed up as policy. Their solution was distance. Their strategy was erasure. They would not fight him publicly. They would not acknowledge the pain. They would simply move forward as if he had never existed, as if his years of service had been footnotes in someone else's story. Harry had expected this, prepared for it. But expecting pain did not make it hurt less. He thought about the document his team still held, the weapon he could still use. One release, and the monarchy would face questions it could not answer. One leak, and the whole machine would grind to a halt. But what would that accomplish? Revenge was not the same as justice. Destruction was not the same as healing. He had fought to escape the institution. Now the institution was letting him go, on their terms, with their narrative. Perhaps that was its own kind of victory, even if it felt like defeat. Meghan found him there, lost in thought. She did not ask if he was okay. She knew better. Instead, she sat beside him and took his hand. They had built something new here, far from the palace gates, a life that was theirs, imperfect but honest. The monarchy might erase him from their story, but he could write his own. Back in London, William prepared to meet his father. The king, finally emerging from his silence, wanted to discuss what came next. William already knew what his father would say, that the crown came first, that difficult decisions were part of leadership, that history would judge them kindly for protecting the institution. All the same things William had been telling himself since signing that order. But as he walked through corridors lined with portraits of ancestors, William wondered if history's judgment mattered. If duty's demands justified personal cost. If the crown was worth the price of brotherhood. He had no answers, only the weight of choices already made. February 3rd, 2026. The day would be remembered not for what was said, but for what was broken. The monarchy stood intact, its foundations shaken but holding. Procedures would be reviewed, protocols would be updated. The machine would adapt and continue, as it always had. But in a London office, a prince stood alone, wondering if he had saved an institution or lost himself in the process. And in a California home, another prince faced an uncertain future, cut off from the family that shaped him, yet unable to fully escape its shadow. Between them stretched an ocean and a silence that no statement could bridge. The emergency order had been an act of leadership, they would say, a necessary decision in impossible circumstances. But it had also been the moment a family broke beyond repair. And as the world moved on to the next scandal, the next crisis, the next headline, two brothers carried the weight of that morning alone. The storm had passed, the damage remained, and the question lingered, unanswered and unanswerable, in the quiet spaces between what was said and what was lost. Had they saved the crown, or destroyed the only thing that truly mattered?